All right, this is Counseling 1, and this is a study of behavior patterns. Now, this course will serve to give you, I think, one of the most important foundations that you'll ever get, other than your foundation in the gospel itself. Because in the end, one of the things you want to realize about life, about business, about finance, about anything, is it all gets down to your ability to work with people. You know, this year across America, 3,500 evangelical churches will close down. Between 3,500 and 5,000, actually. They'll close down. And that happens every single year in America. About 26, 28 years ago, I was a part of an organization, and I was the guy that they were training to send around to their churches so that if a church wasn't growing or if they had problems, my job was to go in and figure out why they were having problems and how to solve those problems and then get them back where they were reaching their communities. So they sent me out to several churches. And what I found in most of those churches were people who had good ministerial skills. In other words, they could preach great. You stand them up in the pulpit, they were incredible. They could do their job. But there were two skills that they didn't have, and those skills were, number one, people skills, and number two, leadership and organizational skills. You see, studies show that the majority of people in the ministry today, they want the ministry to be about preaching. And I've got a revelation for you, and that is that the ministry, the preaching part of it, believe it or not, is the smallest part of what makes a person effective. A great speaker can endear people to himself or to herself for an instant. But what happens after that instant is over? What happens in developing them and discipling them and nurturing them? How do you interact with them through their problems? How do you talk to them? How do you communicate with them? How do you counsel with them? In other words, how do you finish? See, salvation is the front door, and in a certain sense, you might say that even the pulpit is just the front door to the house. It's not the house; it's just the front door to the house. So, as I went out, I saw guys that were just incredible preachers, but their churches would not grow and they would not succeed. I've done the same thing with businesses, with musicians. You know, I've done consulting for a lot of businesses, and you go and you find incredibly talented people that mentally can do about anything, but they don't have people skills, they don't have general leadership skills, and all of that stuff never comes to the fruition that it should. So I think that this is one of the most important foundational classes that you'll ever take. Let me talk to you about the goals of this class. Number one, of course, is to understand your behavioral tendencies and to develop an understanding of how your behavior affects others. I'll give that to you again. And there will be some goals that on your handouts that are different from these, but we'll actually touch on those as we come to them. So, first goal is to understand your behavioral tendencies and develop an understanding of how your behavior affects others. The honest truth is very few people understand how their behavior affects other people. And we walk through life just not knowing that we are generating, if you will, activity in other people's lives. You know, I'm doing this series right now in church called Secret Signals. What are you really saying? Or what's the real message you're sending? And what people don't understand is that communication, words, I wish I could remember this statistic. I just read it over the weekend. But words only make up just a very, very small amount of communication. Because, you see, the average person speaks at 200 words a minute. The average listener processes 800 words a minute. Now, in addition to that, your eyes, your ears, all of your other sensory factors have the ability to take in thousands of bits of information per second. So, this means that verbally, when you're talking to somebody, there is a 600-word lag between your verbal communication and what they're hearing. And then there are thousands of bits of information per second that are flooding into their sensory perception. And this is why you come to realize that when there is inconsistency or conflict between the spoken word or the verbal communication and the nonverbal communication, people will always believe the nonverbal. You see, so we're always sending signals and we're always receiving signals, even when we don't do it on a cognitive level. All this interaction is going on. And amazingly, most of us do not know how we are affecting and influencing other people by our behavior. Second goal of this class is to understand, respect, appreciate, and value individual differences. Now, let me say this to you. I hope you don't do this. Every class that I've ever taught this to for over 20 years, and I'm hoping that you'll be the first class that doesn't do this, but every class I've taught this to for 20 years basically uses this to become mean and judgmental for the first 6 months or so that they learn it. And instead of using it to understand people, they use it to judge people. This is not to judge people. This is not to pigeonhole people. This is not to put people in a stereotypical category. And if you do that, it clearly indicates that you don't have one clue of what you're talking about or what you think you know. As a matter of fact, usually after I teach this class, I get more complaints from the rest of the church in general about the School of Ministry students than any other time in the whole 2-year period, because they walk out and try to judge everybody. They think they know everything. They think they're psychologists. They think they understand everything that's going on. But really, I just want you to know your predecessors, 20 classes before you, were self-righteous, judgmental dweebs. But I am absolutely sure that you're not going to do that, right? Is that right? All right. I have got the right class this time. You want to understand people, and you want to have respect for people. You know what? This should bring about something very positive. This should stimulate compassion and empathy and understanding, not judgment and criticism and stereotyping and pigeonholing. Also, of our goals, we want to develop strategies for working together to increase productivity. And man, you can. When you understand how to communicate with people and you understand their communication styles, the ability for high levels of productivity just multiply incredibly. And then, of course, you want to enhance your effectiveness in accomplishing tasks by improving your relationships with others. You want to learn to identify behavioral styles in other people, which happens very quickly. You want to become more effective at communicating with and ministering to other people. You know, in witnessing to people, I have never had less than, this is minimal, I've never had less than 1 out of 5 people that I witnessed to accept Jesus. Never in my whole life. It's usually higher than that. And you see, we think that people are opposed to the gospel. People aren't opposed to the gospel. People are opposed to the way we present the gospel to them. And there's not one right way necessarily to present the gospel. I mean, the truth is absolute. But when you're talking to a person, see, you got to understand how to communicate with them so that you can be more effective in presenting the truth. Christians tend to make a higher level of commitment to methodology than they do to truth. And so we have these methods that we're committed to, and we'll fight over the methods and lose the truth. Truth is absolute, but methods should really be variable, and we should be willing to change our method in every situation, because the goal is effectiveness, not to be right. The goal is not to be right. We want to identify biblical principles and behavioral styles. And we want to increase your ability to walk in the love of God toward others. This information that I'm sharing with you in this class will give you more of a capacity to walk in love than anything you've ever learned. Now, it won't empower you. The grace of God is what empowers you. You know, it's making a commitment to walk in love, that grace comes alive inside you, but this gives you the tools to actually know how to do it. This gives you the tools to know how to find that place of making people feel loved and valued and communicating with them in a positive way. So let me ask you this. Out of the things I've shared today, I want you to kind of look over that list, and I want you to just put a little check by which one of these is the most interesting or the most valuable for you. Just real quick, like out of that list I just gave you, just go over it. You should be writing those down. Let me give you a good memory tip here, good study tip. Even if you have something written down on a handout, unless it is something you already know, write it down. Because writing it down improves your capacity for memory in an incredible way. As a matter of fact, if you hear something, you forget, I forgot the stats on this, but you forget the majority of everything you hear within 48 hours. But every time you add an action to what you hear, you increase your capacity to remember it. But if you write it down and hear it and do it, you can actually remember 72% of what you ever get exposed to. So even if stuff I tell you is on a handout, even if it's on a list, unless you already know it, write it down. That'll increase your memory incredibly. So out of the things that I said today, if you didn't write your list down, you go back right now and write a sentence. This is what's most valuable to me in taking this course right now. Out of the things I've heard so far, this is what's going to make this valuable to me. Now I'll tell you the reason I'm having you do this. Anytime you set your intention, you can write while I'm telling you this. Anytime you set your intention, you learn 11 times faster than you would if you don't have an intention or a purpose for learning. So this means that if you go into this course with your intention set, if you go into this course with your intention set, in other words, you have a reason for doing this, then you could learn in 6 weeks what would take over 70-something weeks to learn if you didn't have your intention set. So, what are you going to get out of this? And we'll come back to this actually later. Now, your required materials for this course are very important. Number 1 is the book, Understanding How Others Misunderstand You. This is a great little book. Number 2, there is another small book, and the name of it is How to Read a Person Like a Book. That How to Read a Person Like a Book, you actually use that in homiletics, so it's a book you'll use more than once. You'll get great value out of it. And then you have to have your own personal profile. Each student has to have their own personal profile. If you've taken this before, I want you to take it again for this class, and I want you to take it with a new focus. And I'll show you some things about focus and about taking profiles more than once. And let me mention this to you. If you find this incredibly interesting and you think it'll help you in your work or your life, we do have what we call detailed profiles that are computer-generated profiles that sometimes are up to 30 pages of details about your behavior pattern, what motivates you, what demotivates you, how a person can approach you, how you tend to solve problems, how you tend to handle aggression, how you tend to interact in certain situations. And they are incredible profiles. So if you're interested in those, you can contact Darlene. Now, let me mention homework. Every week, there will be homework assignments given out in class. And because the homework assignments are designed to give you practical understanding of the material that's presented, it's essential that the homework be done in a manner that gives you time to reflect on the material before the next class. So the secret to this is, if you wait until next Saturday or Sunday to start your homework, you will lose most of the benefit, because this is going to be a progressive personal revelation. This class will be. In other words, you'll be really every day you'll be learning new things about yourself. Because this is designed to take you kind of on a self-discovery journey, if you just wait till the last day or two to do your homework, then you're not going to really have that opportunity to process it. I don't know if you realize this, but every night when you go to sleep, your mind cycles through the different phases. When you're awake, you're functioning in what's called the beta level of brainwave activity. That's conscious, awareness and communication. Then there's a state of relaxation that everybody goes into just before they go to sleep, just after they wake up, or many times when they're just relaxing. You do this when when you're worshiping and you feel like, oh man, I'm really in the flow. Basically, you're in the alpha state is what's really happening. And and so the alpha state is a relaxed state where the conscious mind stops controlling your thoughts and you start getting more in touch with the thoughts of your heart. But then there's also the delta and the theta states. And when you're asleep, you cycle through these states, and what these states do is, in your sleep, you resolve many of your issues that you learn during the day, and that's the place where you apply, on a heart level, many of the things that you've heard during the day. Sometimes I'll do this. Sometimes while I was gone, I'm preparing this new course that we're going to be presenting next fall called Heart Physics. And it's a really, really in-depth course about dealing with the heart and bringing about transformation. But I'm having to study physics. I am not a physicist. Don't want to be a physicist. I'm a people. People I understand. Emotions I understand. Mathematical equations are of the devil. At least from my perspective. You know what I'm saying? Now, so while I was on this trip, I had to read about 300 pages of some of the hardest reading I've done in a while about quantum physics. Now, when you begin to study quantum physics, I'm telling you, your mind bends in every possible direction that you can imagine. And it's like walking with God. It's like, I've got it. No, I don't. I've got it. No, I don't. No. I think I have. I've really got it this time. No, I don't. I mean, that's the way the process goes. And so what I do when I read books like that is I'll read a portion. I will take myself to the alpha state and go to sleep. And while I'm asleep, and I can usually remember because you learn how to do what's called lucid dreaming. And in lucid dreaming, you deliberately put yourself in a state where you process in your sleep, but you can remember it. And so I take myself to the alpha state, tell myself that I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to process this. I'm going to understand it when I wake up. And so I would read a chapter or two of this book. I'd put myself to sleep, and in my sleep, I would be thinking this stuff through. And then when I wake up, I could understand it. And so I said all that to say this. If you'll do these studies kind of on a day-to-day basis and do them with the intention of personal development, then even your sleeping hours become valuable to you. Every minute of your life then becomes valuable to you. And otherwise, you just make a grade and you get no benefit. And, people ask me, they say, well, what qualifications do I get if I go to your school? Well, I guess that's determined by your definition of qualifications. By qualifications, do you mean a piece of paper? Or by qualifications, do you mean character development and lifestyle development? See, getting a grade in passing doesn't qualify you for anything. I would rather be a C student and grasp the information than to be an A student and just have the details. Because you're going to forget the details on the one there. And information never changes anybody's life. So do your homework. Begin tonight. And every week on your class, in your test, you're going to be asked, how many pages have you read of your required reading? Now, what I always do is I take the total number of pages that you've got to read. I divide it up by 5 or actually by 6, and you're going to have 5 tests, but I divide it by 6. And every week you'll be expected to have read the average number of pages that you should read for that week. So that will be on your test. Every week there will be a short test, and there will be no comprehensive final at the end. Now, My master's degree is in Christian education. I've got a lot of years in education. We have this thing designed in such a way, everything we do, whether you realize it or not, there's a system behind it and there's a logic behind it. And when we're able to make those systems work and when people cooperate with those systems, they get the benefit. The way you will go through this, if instead of crashing and crash study and all this kind of stuff and just acting like a bunch of 17-year-olds, no offense if you're 17 years old, but but you're not in high school, you're not here to get a grade, you are here to invest in your lives. Now, if you hear something and write it down, go home that day and review it, answer your study guide question as a part of the review process, then the test actually becomes about the fourth or fifth review. We give you study guides because we don't want you wasting your time on non-essential, non-effective, non-valuable information. And here's what we understand about learning. Anybody ever heard of mind mapping? Anybody know what mind mapping is? Well, in mind mapping, there's several different facets of mind mapping, but one of the aspects of mind mapping is this: is every time you have a key central thought, it's like your brain sends out through these neural pathways, and it goes out just like a computer, and it grabs every bit of information related to that central thought and pulls it back together. And if you cram and you're not sure what the questions are going to be and all this kind of stuff, then you never really determine what are essential points. And so after you take the test, you forget the information. But if you go through this process the way I'm sharing it with you, where you hear it in class, you write notes, you go home, you do your homework, you make your study guide a review process, and then ultimately, even when you take your test, you make that a review process, then here's what will happen. 10 years from now, if you took the test again, you'll pass it. Because all you'll be learning, as far as vital information, is what we're asking you to learn, which is not going to be many parts. But here's the great part about how this system works. This means all you've got to do is think one thought, and your brain will open up the neural pathways and run out and get everything you've heard about that and pull it back together, and you'll remember things that you just can't believe, could never believe that you could remember and remember them for so long. So work the system with us. The system works, and you'll be glad that you did. All right. Of course, suggestions, keep handouts in order. I think they're numbered, and I think that if you'll keep them in order, it'll help you through your study. I want you to do something right now. I want you to bow your heads with me. Just close your eyes. I want you to think just for a moment about the benefit. How would it benefit your life if you understood your behavior and if you understood the behavior of other people? And I want you to put yourself in a situation, plug in the videotape of your mind, and I want you to put yourself in a situation where you normally have conflict, or you have arguments, or you have frustration, or you get crossways with people or bosses or whatever it is. And I want you to see yourself, just visualize yourself, see yourself handling that differently. Just see yourself handling it different. See yourself coming to a peaceful resolve. Now, seeing it doesn't make it happen. It's the grace of God that makes it happen. Seeing it in your heart just makes it believable. Now, right now in your heart, just commit yourself to the grace of God. Father, this is where I want to go. This is how I want to relate to people. This is how I want to minister. This is how I want to serve. This is how I want to be effective. And because I'm righteous in Jesus, because the Spirit of God is inside me, you're empowering me right now to be able to go to what I'm seeing and intending in my own heart, in my own mind, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Now, there are 4 basic behavioral styles which combine together to form a pattern. And it's very important that you understand that you are not your pattern. It's crucial. In other words, the 4 styles are this, and we'll talk a little bit about them. They're the D, I, S, and C. And everybody has some of each of those. And the truth is, it's not even about having more D or having more C or it's not about having it. It's how much of it you feel comfortable expressing. This is not who you are. This is what you express and what you feel comfortable expressing. Let's talk a little bit about each of these traits and how they come together and form patterns. The D, I'll give you some words to describe the D, would be dominant, direct, forceful, pioneering, high achiever. Now, for some of you, hearing those words is a negative thought, right? You're thinking, I know somebody like it. I don't like those people. And what you're going to learn is, through this course, you're going to learn how to have incredible value for those traits. And maybe you've got some of those traits, and you say, people criticize me for this all the time, but I get things done, and I get criticized for it. You're going to learn how to use those traits without offending and affecting people in a negative way. And then number 2 is the I, the inspirational, people-oriented, life of the party kind of people. And number 3 is the S, security. They're more oriented for security. Standard operating procedures. Specialist. And number 4 is what we call the C. This is the quality control. Detail-oriented. Perfectionistic. And you could put / critical. Now, being critical doesn't have to be negative. Having critical factors just means that you're identifying the essential important factors. So, being critical can be negative. It can be positive. If you're not sure how to unwire a bomb that's been set in the house, you want somebody to be critical. You want somebody that knows the critical details. You don't want to send a life of the party in there. Oh, it'll be all right. Just pull these wires off. Now, one of the first things you've got to learn is there are no good or bad behavior patterns. The moment you start assuming that a behavior pattern is good or bad, it just means you don't understand it. It just means that really what it really means is you've had negative experiences in the past with people with that pattern, and that you probably have past judgments. There are no good or bad behavior patterns. There's just patterns. Here's the key question, and this is what you got to ask yourself about your current behavioral style. Does my behavior produce the results I want to produce in every situation? Does my behavior produce the results I want to produce in every situation? That is the question. It's not about is this right or wrong. It's about is this effective? You see, you may be a passive person, and there may be areas of your life that you really get good results from people by being calm and by being indirect and by not being confrontational. But you know what? That don't get you good results in every area of your life. See, you need to be able to stand up, look somebody in the eye, and say what you need to say. But you know what? You got to be able to do it without being angry. And if you're a passive person, the only time you're ever direct is when you're angry. Therefore, you pass a judgment that other people do things for the same reason you do. So if they're direct, they're obviously angry. Let me tell you something. And this is just a skill I have to have. I don't particularly like it. But I have to be able to, any day, every day, look somebody in the eye and say things that are so straight that it's scary. But very seldom am I ever angry when I do that. Very seldom. But you know something? If you have to be angry to be direct, you will assume that anybody that's direct with you is angry at you. So, see, the key is it effective? You may get great results from being direct, but you know something? You don't get great results all the time. You may get great results by paying attention to detail, but it doesn't give you nothing gives you great results all the time. Now see, even God, and this is one of the things you're going to discover, God worked with people throughout the Scripture based on their behavior pattern. See, people say, well, that's manipulation, that behavior pattern stuff. No, only to the manipulative. It's not manipulation. Stop and think about it. If we were to have a seminar tonight, and we're going to have people show up and tell us about how to follow God. Well, if Paul showed up, Paul was a DC. If Paul showed up, he'd say, look, you don't need to pray. You don't need to seek God. It's in the Bible. Just do it. And if God don't want you to, He'll tell you. Well, you look at him and say, well, he's the Apostle Paul. Surely he knows. I tell you, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so everybody tries to go out and do it like Paul would do it. And then next month, we have Peter come in. Peter says, all I know is, man, I just feel it and do it. So if you just feel it, you just do it. You just feel it in your heart. Just do it, Okay, I'm just going to start. I'm going to start, And then you have Abraham come in. Abraham would come in and say, don't ever take one step until God has spoken to you and has confirmed it to you. Now, remember, I began this class by saying that we're more committed to our methodology than we are to the truth. See, here's the truth. The truth is God speaks to us and leads us. That's the truth. The methodology is, which way am I comfortable letting Him lead me? But our problem is, if you're an SC and you I want to have it clearly spoken to me, I want to have confirmation, then you're going to go tell everybody, this is the way that God leads you, and if you do it another way, you're messed up. Or if you're one of those guys that just says, God, you said it, I'm going to do it, if you don't want me to do it, tell me, then you'd go out and tell everybody that's the way to do it, and if you do it another way, you're just a coward. We've influenced the salvation of well over 10 million people just in the last 10 years. Now, I want to tell you something. Very few things I've ever done did God tell me to do. I just made a decision. I just said, something? You said preach the gospel to every creature in the world, so I'm going. And if I get ready to go somewhere and you don't want me to go, tell me. And there's been a lot of times, I'd start to go somewhere. A couple of years ago, I was getting ready to go do a meeting in, where was it? Somewhere in the Congo. And he was like, nope, don't go. I said, okay. Stayed home. Well, it turned out they had an outbreak of Ebola there at the time that I would have been there. Would have probably died there. And I can tell you several times that I got ready to go, and it's like, didn't come together, or God spoke to my heart. I can tell you sometimes that He very specifically spoke to me to go somewhere. But you know what? The majority of times, there was no God speaking to me about anything. It's just in the Bible. Go do it. But I don't try to impose that on other people. I realize that other people need other things. And so God led Abraham different. He led Paul different. He led Peter different. But He had to work with what their comfort zone was. And that's really what your behavior pattern is. We'll get into that. Now, grace means that we are not locked into our behavior. This course will help you apply the teaching of grace, because grace is God's ability, God's capacity to be and do who He says you are. To me, this course gives you more practical tools to apply grace than anything, because for the first time you have the opportunity to sort out the difference between who you are and what your behavior is, and there is a difference. And you have the opportunity to choose other behaviors and feel comfortable about it, and then trust God to manifest His grace and His power in you so that you can do it. So this is not who you are. It's just how you choose to function. The profile will give us the tools and understanding of how we want to change and to be more effective, and grace will make it possible. So the thing you want to understand is you can be any pattern you want to be at any given time. What was Jesus' behavior pattern? According to who he was talking to. If he was talking to the Pharisees, he'd get on top of that C behavior in just a heartbeat, because they had to have details. Boom, 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 boom. If he was dealing with the downtrodden, man, he'd use those S traits. Be very compassionate, very human, If he needed to move in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, he'd express those I traits and be inspirational and follow God at the drop of the hat. He'd bring the hat. And then when he was in situations that required force and power for deliverance or miracles or something, he'd stand up and bring it. See, the Gospels all address each of the four different behavior styles. Matthew was written to the C's. John was written to the I's. Luke was written to the S's. And Mark was written to the D's. You ever wonder why you go to Mark? It's just chapter 1, miracle. Chapter 2, miracle. Chapter 3, miracle. Why? D's love power. They love the expression of power. Power is what it's all about, see? And one of the things that you'll discover is that when you discover what your basic behavioral trait is, you're going to go, no wonder I liked that particular account of the Gospels more than this other one, you know? And you'll see at different times when you've had changes in your life where you suddenly say, no, I believe I like this one over here better, you know? And you'll realize why, because of the frame of mind that you were in. That's what ministered to you the most effectively at that time in your life. Isn't that incredible? Now, let me give you some reasons for learning this profile material. Number one, all business involves dealing with people. Here's something that we fail to understand in business and in ministry. That is, nobody makes a penny in the business world unless somebody sells something. It don't matter what you can build, can't anybody sell it? If they can't sell it, you can build it and starve. Well, in ministry, in anything in life, nothing that really brings progress happens apart from interaction between people. So the need for people skills is essential in every business. One of my great claims to fame, and I use this when I go in and do consulting for businesses, this is one of the things that gives me credibility. I was in a particular business one time. I started this business with $230, and in 90 days I was netting $10,000 a month. And I did that until I sold the business a couple of years later. And the way I went from investing $230 to netting $10,000 a month is really using the material that I'm teaching you right now. Now, let me tell you this. Knowing this stuff doesn't help you. It's applying it that helps you. I went out and I had 25 appointments in a row. And out of those 25 appointments, I closed 24 of them for $5,000 each. In other words, I walked out of that appointment with a check for $5,000, and I closed the 25th appointment and walked out of it with a check for $25,000. And basically, this is the honest truth, basically, I created enough momentum that to make $10,000 a month until I sold the business, all I had to work was about 5 days a week because I got that momentum going right off the bat. Now, you'll learn about this, and this is not about manipulation, and we'll get into that a little bit later about dealing with that. So, reasons for this: number one, all business involves dealing with people. Number two, negotiating. I remember one time when I was, and I hate sales. People think I hate sales. I don't like to sell anything to anybody. But I've had to do it a few times just to make money. But I remember one time I went in and I was trying to transact this deal with this guy. And it was one of those deals where we went in and we said, okay, this is what you're doing. This is how much money you're spending. These are your goals. And you know, I got a commitment from this guy. If I can take these dollars you're spending and accomplish your goals and do it faster and do it more effective and you'll have more money at retirement, will you do business with me? Oh, yeah. I go back, man. Everything that he wanted, I had it put together. I could not close the deal. So I didn't know anything about behavior at that time, and he was an S. S is like security. You know, he kept asking me questions like, well, how long has the company been in business? How many years have you been with the company? And it's like, none of that stuff meant anything because it was a secured business. It didn't matter if the company folded tomorrow. His money would have been secure because it went into a federally protected pool. And you know, and I'm just thinking to myself, you are the stupidest person in the world. I have just handed you about about $250,000 at retirement, and you're too dumb to know to jump on this deal. What is wrong with you? And I'll never forget, I couldn't close the deal. I was so frustrated. I thought this guy was the dumbest guy I'd ever met in my whole life. But see, the real truth was, I just didn't know how to make him feel comfortable. I didn't know what he needed to transact this deal. It was interesting, but see, I was approaching it direct. He wanted security. He didn't want bottom line. And see, direct communicators just want bottom line. Just give me the bottom line. Well, in this same company that I worked for, I was in a training program, and so they took me out on a training sale. And man, I had set this deal up, and it was $1 million deal. I mean, it was big. It was one of the biggest that this organization had ever done. And man, I had this thing on the line. I'm looking at that commission on $1 million sitting there, and this guy's training me, and he's trying to close this woman, and he was a high C detail. I sit there with him, and man, he goes through these details, He's trying to he's trying to persuade with details. We are there for hours, and I'm watching the commission off of $1 million deal float away. And at one point I said, and when you're training like that, you're not supposed to say anything. And I didn't know anything about the other behavior patterns, but I knew about bottom liners, and I knew if you were a bottom liner, you don't want all these details. You just want the bottom line. How much is it going to cost? How much am I going to make? How long is it going to take? So I said, excuse me, can I say something? And he said, okay. And I grabbed his contract, and I spun it around in front of the woman. I said, look, here's the deal. This is how much money you're going to make. This is how much money you're going to pay. This is how much money you're already spending. Sign the contract. We got to go. She said, okay. We did $1 million deal. All because, in that case, I knew what kind of communication she wanted. And we walked out there, and he said, man, you never do that. You usually lose the deal if you do that. No, you lose the deal if you do that with somebody that's not a direct communicator. It's the same way with leading people to Jesus. Man, I say I'm somebody's a direct communicator. They don't want to know about the virgin birth. They don't want to know about the Jews and the Sadducees and the Pharisees and when the Bible was written and the denominations and the churches. All they want to know is heaven or hell now. That's all they want to know. Okay, we can solve that. Boom. And you'll watch people, they just keep giving them information. So, see, when you understand what a person wants, it's not about manipulation. You're not getting them to do what you want. You're just communicating with them about what they want in a way that makes them feel comfortable. It's just that simple. So, negotiations. Matter of fact, here is my sales statement. If people want what you have, all that is left is to make them feel comfortable with the transaction. If people want what you have, all that is left is to make them feel comfortable with the transaction. Now, this does mean that when you realize somebody doesn't really want what you've got to walk away from the deal. And I want to tell you something. I have walked away from money many times that I could have walked out the door with because I knew they really didn't need or want what I have. I'm going to leave money lay on the table. And you know what gives you the power to leave money lay on the table? Because I know I can go somewhere else and make it. If you're desperate, you'll convince yourself and you'll be a manipulator and you'll use that person for your benefit. If you can't leave money on the table, you can never trust yourself. And I've left a lot of big deals lay on the table and just said, you know something? This deal isn't right for you. It's not right for me. I am not the right person for you to be doing business with. There are better services or products than what I am offering you, and I'll give you some names. Let it go. And I have walked away from big commissions many times. But see, you have no fear in doing that when you know the next deal I sit down with, I'm going to probably close. Because if they want what I got, I know how to make them feel comfortable in the process, and so we can do business and everybody can win. Number 3, talking about reasons for learning this. Performing at your present job, whatever it may be, is determined by your ability to communicate with people. Performing at your present job, whatever it may be, is determined by your ability to communicate with people. Now, how many of you have figured out the good guys don't always get the raises and promotions? Everybody figured that out? The best workers don't get the raises and promotion. It is the good communicators who usually get them. I've watched good people get passed over all the time because they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to communicate with their boss. They don't know how to, they don't know how to say what needs to be said in a way that people want to hear it. Ecclesiastes 9:11. I love this passage of Scripture. This is one of those paradigm shift scriptures for me. He says, and this is the wisest man in the world. You know what amazes me? We got a book that includes a couple of books by the richest, wisest man that ever lived. And we don't have enough value for it to learn it and use it. You know what that means? That means it wouldn't matter if somebody counseled you and told you what to do. You wouldn't do it. You got the richest man that's ever lived, the wisest man that's ever lived, telling you how to succeed at everyday life. Are you building your life on it? Well, you might want to consider it. He says this, I returned. Now, this is Solomon. Man, Solomon was getting all twisted. This was his process about, man, I don't know. Why do some people succeed? Some people don't. And so he listened to the charismatics of his day and said, well, if you're succeeding, it's because of God's blessing you. No, not necessarily. If you're succeeding, it means that you're probably really a good person. No, not necessarily. And so he got all frustrated about this. And even David, you read the Psalms, David said, man, I looked out here at the wicked. I saw them prosper like the righteous should prosper. And I saw it go with the righteous like it ought to go with the wicked. And he said, my feet nearly slipped until I went into the house of God and considered. So our problem is we just look at it and pass judgments. We don't go back to God's Word and let that become our wisdom, you see. And so Solomon said, I returned. This was after all of his frustration. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill. But time and chance happens to them all. Now, in my Bible, I have a little parenthesis that says, and the wise know how to see and seize the opportunities. Solomon's saying here, everybody has the same opportunities. It's like, you've heard the story about the two shoe salesmen. They find some remote island, and they've never had shoes. And these two shoe companies, they get into this who's going to get there first, So they send, these two different companies send two shoe salesmen over there to capture this market, They get over there, one guy calls back and says, get me a ticket home. Nobody over here wears shoes. Another guy calls home and says, send me everything you've got. Nobody here wears shoes. What made it an opportunity was the way you look at it. What made it an opportunity was the way you see it and seize it, you see. And so time and chance happens to everybody. The question is, are we going to see it and seize it? Number 4, of course, the ability to motivate. Now, I want you to understand, everybody is motivated. You're motivated. If you're doing nothing but laying on your bed feeling sorry for yourself, you're motivated. Every person is presently doing what they are motivated to do. Even if it's destructive, even if it's stupid. Was that a demon coming out? That happens, just the anointing, just. Everybody is motivated, and what you're doing right now is what you're motivated to do, and there's something that's motivating you to do it. Now, you can create an environment of motivation wherein people can be motivated for positive instead of negative reasons. Now, creating a motivational environment is real interesting. See, what motivates you doesn't motivate everybody else. I sat down with one of my son-in-laws the other night and began to talk about the theories of quantum physics and the concept that there is no such thing as matter, and that if you look at the subatomic level from one perspective, it looks like a wavelength. If you look at it from another perspective, it looks like a particle, and that there is really no such thing as some of these things other than how we look at them and when we look at them and where we're standing when we look at them. And we started talking about the equations that you work this stuff out with and the fact that light travels at 144,000 miles per second. So in actuality, I can see back in time as much as 6 million years because all I've got to do is look up in the sky and I can see what's happening on a star that burned out 6 million years ago. So I'm traveling back in time because of my perception, and his eyes are lighting up and he's getting all excited. I got news for you. Not everybody get excited about that. See, what motivates people? A true motivator finds out what motivates a person and how to motivate a person and does what works, what's interesting and beneficial and motivational to them. Now, without an understanding of behavior patterns, what you think will motivate another person may actually demotivate them. If you're a detail-oriented person and you walk into a place and you got a high giving a presentation, he's like, man, God, this is the most incredible opportunity you've ever seen. I'm telling you, we'll make $1 bazillion a day. You know, and you're going, liar. You know. Now all the highs are going, yeah, sign me up. Here, take my money, sign me up. They're getting motivated. Why? Because the way you're presenting it motivates that same behavior pattern. But now stop and think about it. If there's 4 different behavioral styles, and if you only communicate in one style, you lose effectiveness with 75% of the people you talk to. That means only 1 out of 4 people are you going to have rapport with, and to a great degree you're going to have conflict with the other 75%. And you're not going to be able to motivate them. And what if that happens to be your husband, your wife, or your children? Or somebody that's failing and really, really needs help. I'm dealing with a person right now that's incredibly high D. And no matter how much sympathy I have for this person, I know that the one and only thing that they will respond to is me being hard-nosed. A D, you know, until you take a D, throw them under the train, and let them get run over, then they go, well, okay, maybe I better listen. There are some people you can just sit down and say, here's the facts, and they'll listen. There's some people you can just sit down and be warm and connect with them, and they'll listen. There's some people you just have a party and they'll forget about it. C's think that all I's are liars. You know, D's and I's speak in generalities. How many of you speak in generalities? All right. So I speak in generalities. Particularly if I'm preaching. Now, if I'm giving a report or if I'm doing business, I get real specific because I've learned that you had to. But if I'm preaching or something, you know, I'm going to give generalities. I remember one time I had this secretary that worked for me, and one day I was walking out of the building and I met her, and she stopped me and she said, I just want you to know I'm quitting. You're the biggest liar I've ever seen in my whole life. I said, what? I said, what are you talking about? She said, you're a liar. You lie all the time. I said, you know, God, maybe there's something I'm not seeing here. I mean, so I said, you know, let's talk. I said, come on. I mean, she was just going to walk out the door right then. So I took her back over to my office and said, what did I do? I said, I don't understand. So she had a list. You know, she's a C. You know, when a C comes to chew you up and spit you out, they got a grinding machine. You know what I'm saying? They got this list. You know? If it's an I, they're mad. They're just not sure why. They can't remember why, but they're bad. But if there's C, they got a list. If it's an S, they don't tell you they're mad. They just kill you in your sleep. If it's a D, they torture you to death. So we sat down and we started talking. She said, look here. And she had her list. She said, look at this. She said, you told the people that we needed to raise $100,000 for this project, and you know good and well that we only need $96,542. Okay? So what else you got on your list? She said, you know that crusade that you guys did in Honduras? Yeah. She said, you said that 5,000 people got saved then. All we really have recorded is about 4,800. And that was her whole list. I said, so you think that when I'm preaching I should slow down and say, you know, she said, yes, if you're not, you're lying. And I said, no, the point is not to convey the details. The point is to convey a conception so that people can decide if they're interested in the idea, not whether or not they can tally up the score. Well, you're a liar and I'm quitting. And she quit. She quit. And it took years to restore that friendship. She actually just had to grow and mature as a person and get some professional experience to realize, you know, different people communicate a different way. For example, I don't want to go into this too far, but for example, if you're an I or a D, unless you're doing it for professional reasons, which you could be, usually if you get real specific, you are lying. D's don't get specific. I mean, unless they're doing it for business reasons, they're not going to get specific unless they need to hustle you. C's get specific to be honest. D's get specific to lie. So you see, we look at people and pass judgments. And remember, a judgment is when you say why someone does something. You never know why anybody does anything. Half the time, they don't even know. I don't even know why I do that. I don't know why I'm here today. I should be at home, taking the day off. Where are we? Oh, yeah. There's a theory I developed back in the early 70s, late 70s, early 80s. I call it positive internal motivation. Positive internal motivation works from this. Number one, all motivation must first and foremost be positive. It should never be based on fear or on negative factors. I want to draw people to what they want to do. I don't want to scare them away from what they don't want to do. You understand? See, there is toward motivation. There is away from motivation. And it's really interesting when you look back over your life, how many decisions did you make because of what you were trying to get away from instead of what you were trying to go toward? A person who is driven by away from motivation, their life is never a linear line going from point A to point B. It's here and here and here and here and here because they're trying to escape something painful or threatening rather than being drawn toward something desirable. And I don't want to use that kind of, there's a place for it, and I understand it. So, all motivation must be positive. Secondly, all motivation must be internal. See, people do what they do for their reasons, not for my reasons. So I have to find out what is important to you, and I have to show you how to get it. See, the dumbest thing you can do when you're preaching the gospel is try to get people saved for your reasons. Those reasons may not mean anything to them. You know, heaven may not mean anything to a person that's going through hell today. They want to know how to get out of hell today. And so, in presenting the gospel, you find out what a person's needs are, and you show them how the gospel will meet those needs. You show them that's what Jesus did. You show them, he didn't present the gospel the same way every time. Neither did Paul, neither did anybody else. So, internal motivations says this is what's important to you. Now, give you an example of this. Person comes in and says, Jim, we'll call the ministry. We're going to go to Bible school. Okay. So you sit down with them, and when they tell you what they want to do. So then they start Bible school, and then all of a sudden in the middle of Bible school they start doing all these goofy things and taking all these side roads. You can chew them out, tell them how stupid they are, and all you're going to do is offend them. And it is stupid. But you know something? That's not going to help them. What you got to do is go back to and get them in touch with why did you come here to start with? And if I can get you focused back on why you came here, if that is not enough to motivate you, then the truth is it'd be a struggle to keep you here all the time anyhow. I do the same thing in business. When I used to hire people in my businesses, I'd start a file on a person when they came to work for me. I'd say, why do you want to work at this company? What are your goals? What are your financial goals? Where do you want to be a year from now? And I'd get them to give me some financial goal about where they want to be a year from now. I said, okay, then to make this much money, For a new person in the first year, average is this much per sale. So you got to make this many sales, and a year from now you'll be there. Now, are you sure you want to do this? Yeah, I want to do this. Okay. If you got to make this many sales, then we know that you got to have this many appointments, because a person in their first year is going to close a certain percentage of their appointments. So you got to get 10 appointments so that you can close 7 of them or 4 of them or whatever the statistics were. So now, this means that you got to close this many deals per week in order to reach your goal. Are you sure you want to do this? Oh, yes, this is what I want to do. Okay. Then in order to close that many appointments, you got to have this many appointments. So in order to have this many appointments, you got to make this many calls. And basically, I would just get it down to, this is how many times a day you got to dial the phone. Now, 3 months down the road, the person's hanging out by the water cooler, eating bonbons, goofing off, Well, you could chew them out, but a lot of good that's going to do. Here's an optimal question. Now, what was it you said you wanted to do? Didn't you say that you wanted to, you and your wife wanted to have a baby, so you needed to add a room onto your house, and you wanted to get it where she could quit work? That is what you told? Oh, yeah. And how much did you say it was going to take to do that? Because y'all want to do that the first year, right? Yeah. Okay, let's see. Let's come in my office with me here just for a minute. Let's look at this. Let me pull out their sales stats. So, something really, oh, man, at your current rate, it's going to take you 3 years to get there. Did you change your goal? No. Does it seem like it's too hard? No. Do you still want to do this in a year? And you start talking about what their goal is, and suddenly they get back in touch with their goals. I'm going to tell you a little secret here. We don't have time to go into it. See, most of us live in the beta level. We live out of our conscious mind, which means our attention is changed by what's in front of our eyes. And most of us do not live out of our heart. If you hang around here long enough, you will learn how to live out of your heart. And it will get to where it does not matter what is in front of you. You will have an inner compass that will always guide you in the direction of your goals. Effortlessly. So it's got to be positive. It's got to be internal. And it has to motivate you to take action. If you're not taking action, you're not motivated. So one of the things you've got to do then, you've got to learn to promote others in their vision while fulfilling your own vision. See, nobody should take another person's vision away from them. Let me tell you something. Nobody should interpret another person's vision. You have no business telling anybody else what they ought to do. You don't know what anybody ought to do. You need to ask them what they want to do. No matter how encouraging you think you are, if you're telling somebody else what you think they ought to be doing, you are a manipulator. So you don't know what kind of advice to give somebody until they first of all tell you what they want to do. Then you have somewhere to start. So learn to promote others in their vision. Don't take it away from them. Proverbs 29:18 says that where there's no vision, and that word vision there, actually, most translations of the Bible translate as, a vision from God. That's actually just the word, a clearer mental picture. See, when people lose a clear mental picture of where they're going, it says they cast off restraints. A person loses their vision, they get in sin. A person loses purpose, that clear picture of where they're going with their life. Man, they have no motivation. So they stop doing all the right things because they're not motivated anymore. So you got to get people back in touch with what they want to do with their life. You get them in touch with what they want to do with their life, and if they have any trust and commitment to God at all, they'll manifest the grace to do whatever they need to do. Number 5, of course, the ability to properly relate to family. Golly, we could spend a lot of time on this. Understanding the needs of your family. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Understanding how each family member needs to communicate. God, I can't tell you how many parents have come to me and say, I'll tell you, that kid of mine is the laziest kid I've ever seen. I just gave him 2 simple things to do today, and I got home, they weren't doing anything. I go home, I find out the kid's a SC, the father's a D. SC wants specific instructions, D wants to give general instructions. I want you to clean up your room and clean up the yard. And they walk out the door, and they're going, now what does that mean? What do you mean clean up the yard? Am I supposed to mow the yard? Rake the yard? You just saying pick the trash up? What are you saying here? And they get paralyzed in indecision. It's not laziness. It's just lack of motivation because of bad communication. Number 6, knowing what threatens you, knowing what motivates you. Few people actually know themselves, and they fail to anticipate how they will respond in certain situations. When I get into a situation, there's not many things that make me explosive, but when I get into a situation that make me explosive, I usually very calmly look the person in the eye and say, you do not want to have this conversation with me, and it would be in your best interest to end this until another time. And I do it incredibly calm and incredibly peaceful. But you know something? I know me. And when somebody starts pushing that button and I'm not at a place where I'm ready to deal with it, I know that they are not going to like the way this goes if they pursue this. And it's amazing how many people go, yeah, but I just got to talk about it now. Oh, no, you really don't. And so we don't know what threatens us, and therefore we let ourselves get sucked into conflicts that we're not ready to handle. That at that moment that we're going to mess up. And most of us don't even know what really motivates us. Most people select the wrong job over and over and over and over again. You know why? Because they don't know what kind of jobs they'd actually be comfortable at and enjoy doing. I've done career counseling with people where they'd failed at everything they'd ever done, and I just sit down with them, do a profile on them, talk to them, and get them to start selecting jobs that fit not just their skills. So you think because you got skills, you got the right job. No, it's got to fit your behavior style too. I was with this family in Austria, one of our fellowship ministers, international team members over there, and his wife came from her father was a military leader in Ghana, and so they grew up in this very kind of rigid home. At 11 years old, her and each one of her siblings were sent to a British boarding school, and they grew up very strict. And the two sisters that I met, I don't know how it was with the rest of them, they both spent the early part of their life in jobs they didn't want to do because they were influenced by their families to go in a particular job. And like one of them was a lawyer. Man, this gal's an IC. Yeah, she could learn those critical details, but she hated it. She had too much people orientation to be a lawyer. Now she's a pastor. And, the other one was a nurse. She didn't want to be no nurse. But see, it's amazing. I think over 68% of the people in America today would change jobs if they felt secure enough about themselves to do it. Doctors and lawyers, over 90%, if they had to do over again, would not do what they're doing. So you come from these real influential families where my father was a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor, I got to be a doctor. And you get convinced that that's what you should do. And so it's amazing how you'll take people who have never succeeded at anything, and suddenly they start finding success because they start looking at it instead of what I feel obligated to do. They start looking at it from the perspective, what do I want to do? What do I enjoy doing? I always tell people, if you can find what you enjoy doing, find a way to serve people in doing it, then find a way to make money in doing it, you will succeed and you'll never work a day in your life. Because every day you'll just get and do what you enjoy. And that's hard to classify as work. You'll know how to, number 8, know how to turn weaknesses into strength. I can't tell you, I have to kill you. 7 is understanding your strengths and weaknesses. I just skimmed over that, and I probably didn't even give you the number. Number 8 is to know how to turn your weaknesses into strengths. Now, all of your personal weaknesses are actually the overuse of a strength. You're just trying to use your behavior style in every situation that makes it become a weakness. All of your personal weaknesses are really just the overuse of a strength. In other words, it works for you in some situations, but you try to use it in every situation. Therefore, it becomes your weakness. Number 9, knowing the acceptance of God. being comfortable with who you are, knowing yourself apart from your behavior pattern. Golly, that is so incredible. I mean, that won't happen to you because you got the information. That'll happen to you in communion with God. So number 9 is knowing the acceptance of God. Number 10 is giving the acceptance of God. And number 11 is ministry and people skills. Eleven is ministry and people skills. What was it? 60-something% of the pastors in America that were surveyed last year said they were completely inept in leadership skills. Only 12 to 14% of the people in ministry today consider themselves to have good leadership skills. But they say they don't want to be leaders, they want to be preachers. Being a good preacher does not mean you can pastor a church. Matter of fact, most people in the ministry today, the greatest thing that could happen in America today would probably be if maybe 2/3 of all the churches in America shut down and those guys went and became members of a team where they did not have to carry the administrative load. I know great preachers, great people can minister incredibly effective, and you put them out there by themselves and they fail every time. And then they start thinking there's something wrong with them, and something wrong with them and God. You know what I mean? And just become this miserable thing. And you know, in America, you got this idea: if I am not the captain of the boat, then there's not worth being on the boat, so I'll drown myself. No. Truth is, if we learn to be team builders, then most of us would go farther with our skills than we ever go alone. That's what synergy is. That's why Jesus built teams. There was a man that went on a long journey searching for wisdom. Traveled miles and miles and miles to the desert. And he heard that there was a wise man high atop of a mountain. He spent weeks and months climbing the mountain, getting to the top of the mountain. Found the man sitting on top of the mountain. The man said, "What is it you seek?" He says, "Well, I seek wisdom." The man said, "If you'd be wise, know yourself better than others know you." The man started to walk away, and he said, "But if you would be wiser still, know others better than they know themselves." Now here's the honest truth. On a certain level, I could probably spend a day with you. And on a certain level, I would know more. Matter of fact, the truth is I could spend about 15 minutes with you. And on a certain level, I would know more about you than you do. Really, I mean, I'll sit down with people and they'll think, that's the Holy Spirit showing you that. Well, the Holy Spirit is helping me. He's bringing to my memory, the wisdom of God and the things I've planted in my heart. And yes, the gifts of the Holy Spirit do work, but the honest truth is, as much as anything, this is just because I understand behavior. You can pretty much anticipate what people are going to do. You can pretty much anticipate how a conflict is going to go and how to solve it and how to avoid it and how to work around it and how to keep the person motivated and how to keep things moving forward. So we have this incredible, incredible opportunity to be able to just do what just seemed totally impossible. Now, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to try to make wise men and women out of all of you. I'm just hoping I can get you to the place where you'll know yourself. But if not, you will surely reach the place where you can judge somebody else. Oh, no, that's those other classes. I'm sorry. I was thinking about another class. All right. Take out your profile. Go to your profile very quickly because we're going to do part of this off camera and you're only going to have 7 minutes to do it. We're getting ready to go to our first break. Take your profile, and on the front of your profile, hand me your profile there just for a minute. Let's see here. They've changed these a little bit. On your front of your profile, number 1, be sure and put your name because I don't know if you realize it, but everybody's profile looks exactly like yours. So you could get it mixed up with somebody else's. Put your name. Today's date is very, very important because you're going to profile yourself at other times and you're going to compare the differences between the date. And you'll see right under the blue here, I'll give this back to you in a second. You'll see right under the blue here that you've got this place for the date. and then it says response focus. You have to decide what is your focus while you're taking this profile. Darling, do you have an extra profile you can bring up here for me? What is your response focus going to be? In other words, you've got to say, I'm going to answer these questions in light of how I'm at work. You're going to say, I'm going to answer these questions in light of how I'm in my marriage. I'm going to answer these questions in light of how I'm with my children. But there's got to be a response focus that you choose. And when you answer these questions, you've got to answer them with that focus in mind. Now, let me say this. If you want to do this just in a general way, that's fine. And I'll show you either at the end of today's class or in another class or two how you can go back and profile yourself on the same paper profile in a way with other focuses and you using different color ink, and so that you can compare how you are in different settings. Because whether you realize it or not, you change to some degree in every setting, or you're the most boring person alive, one or the other. But anyhow, let me borrow yours just a minute. Darlene's getting me one here. On this inside here, everybody open up on the inside to page 2, and you will see on the inside of page 2 that there are 28 boxes. Thank you, Darlene. That there are 28 boxes, and in those boxes you have a list of 4 words: enthusiastic, daring, diplomatic, and satisfied. Now, one of those words you're going to say describes you most. I want you to take a coin out of your purse, and I want you to pick right now which one of those words describes you most, and lightly. For all the D's, I did say lightly. You do not want to scrub all the way through the table when you do this. So you want to take a coin, and you want to go to the one word under that most describes you. If you do not have a coin, that means you're a Bible school student. Which is synonymous with being broke. I understand, believe me. All right, real quick, like, square one. Which one of these 4 words describes you most? Take your coin and just rub the little oval area under the most column parallel to that word. Real quick, like. Take your first impression. Don't study it. If you study it, you will not do this properly. Or you should have answered the question by now. I want you to go now to the least column of that same box and say, now, there's 3 words left. Which word describes you least? And use the coin to rub the little oval that is parallel to the word that describes you least. Now, your most and least cannot be the same word unless you have a multiple personality disorder. Does everybody understand how to do that now? All right. We're going to cut the tape off and do this in 7 minutes, and then you can take a break.